Welcome back to Rev Endurance Sports, and today we're going to do another episode in Power Meters for Dummies. In a previous episode, I believe it was episode 3, I spoke about what watts per kilogram is, why it's important for, let's say, you're riding with your mates or for pacing yourself. And in previous other videos, I've talked about going out and doing 1 minute intervals, 5 minute intervals, and if you could find a road or a place where you could do a 20-minute interval, whether that be a climb or a flat terrain or something, so that you can start getting some data from your rides and making some sense of what you feel when you see whatever you see on your computer. So let's talk about this briefly because so on your cycling computer, it is my recommendation, you do you, that you have one of your data screens with your watts per kilogram and the garbage in, garbage out. So you got to enter your correct weight. So I strongly recommend that if your weight doesn't fluctuate, it's not as important, but my weight fluctuates at least 2 kilos from any given day. Sometimes I'm 150, sometimes I'm 155 pounds, right? So that this watts per kilogram is going to be derived from the weight that you have inputted into your computer. And then heart rate. This is a very simple screen, and in a lot of cases, this is a variation of this screen. Like maybe I'll have grade or maybe I'll have something else on there, but I generally have a screen where I really focus on watts per kilogram. And so let's talk about that as well. So when I say watts per kilogram, that's the calculation I'm talking about. So watts slash kilogram. So we're going to take an example of someone who weighs 154 pounds, about 70 kilograms, and he's going to do 210 watts. So if he weighs 70 kilograms and he's going to do 210 watts, then that basically is 3 watts per kilogram. You take 210, divide it by the person's weight, in this case 70, and it's 3 watts per kilogram. All right, well, why is this important? Well, some very smart folks over at Training Peaks and other places will use your watts per kilogram to kind of give you an idea of what are your strengths. Let's say you have a very good sprint, but you don't know that until you get the data. But you're not very good for an hour climb. Or conversely, you're a very good time trialist, so you can do a good 40K time trial, so a very good 1 hour of power, but you don't have much of a sprint, right? And as a coach, you want to go through this process of a FTP test so that you can learn what are your athlete's strengths. And let's say they're doing triathlon, well, you need to work on this. If they're doing road racing, then you need to work on this. So you do an FTP test, and in that FTP test, you will start to fill in these blanks. So on this sheet, I will show it in a second. You have 5-second power, 1-minute power, 5-minute power, and FT, so functional threshold power. And that's another video I shot, but functional threshold power is theoretically the maximum average power that you can hold for 1 hour. Okay? So let's just say that an individual goes out and does each of these tests or each of these intervals, and you could, here's another thing. If you don't want to do an actual FTP test all in one day, just go out and do, maybe do a ride. Maybe you're doing a group ride and just hit some sprints, 3, 4 of those sprints during that ride. So now you have some sprint data. And then maybe also in that group ride, you might have had a good 1 minute surge, pretty hard, pretty maxed out. And then you have that data. Then maybe another day you go out and do a 5-minute interval. And then, I like to do my FTP test on a climb because we have our climbs here, at least at my speed. All right. So now we look at this. And so we say, and this is another reason why during, also in the power group thread that I have going, I also try to get folks on that thread to talk in watts per kilogram. Talking in absolute watts, it doesn't really mean much, right? Because if folks weigh completely, on two ends of the spectrum. So for example, I just shot a podcast with John's friend who weighs 200 pounds, and then John who weighs 142 pounds. So that's a big disparity in weight. So if Duke is talking to John and says, oh, I was holding 300 watts up that climb, for John, that's like, oh my God, that's like 4.7 watts per kilo. That's what he would have to hold 300 watts. But for Duke, that's only like 3 point something, right? So it's a big difference, right? All right, so now let's look at this power profile chart. And what we're looking at, whether you're male or female, you look at each one of these two columns. You'll notice that it is separated by, there's brackets, but then they also overlap, right? So you have an untrained athlete, you have like a Cat 5, what we use here in the United States. I don't know what the levels are in Europe, but that's kind of like the lowest level of categorized racing, Cat 4, so on and so forth. And then you get way up here to your world-class athletes, right? Okay. So let's just say you go out and you do a sprint. So in this example, the athlete has done a 1,000-watt sprint. He weighs 70 kilograms. So that comes out to 14.2 watts per kilogram. Well, if we look on the sheet here, and I've just put this post-it note here so to avoid some of the noise, 14.2 watts per kilogram puts him at about a category 4 type racer. Okay, the numbers would be different, of course, on the women's side, right? But it's fair to say that that's not a very good sprint if this person is racing in a Cat 3 race, Cat 2 race, or a very fast group ride with some masters, retired pros in it. So in his case, and this is how you use watts per kilogram as a coach, you say to that athlete, you really can't be hanging around for the final sprint because you're going to get left behind. So maybe when you're doing a criterium, you want to be in the breakaway. And you want to get 2 to 3 minutes with 3 or 4 other guys in a breakaway, because if it comes down to a sprint and you're still in the bunch with them, you're in a Cat 3 race or a Cat 2 race, there are people that have a much higher sprint output and you're not going to win a race, right? So that's how you use that. But maybe that person has a very, very high FTP, so a very high power output, maximum average power for 1 hour. So let's use that as an example. So let's use the same athlete, but this athlete has a very good 1 hour power. He can hold 280 watts for 1 hour. divided by 70. That means his watts per kilogram for 1 hour, or his functional threshold power for 1 hour, right? Because that's what that theoretically means, is 4 watts per kilogram, right? Okay. So this gentleman has like a Cat 4 sprint, but since he can hold 4 watts per kilogram for 1 hour, which is this column here, FT, 4 watts per kilogram, puts him very nicely right in the middle of a Cat 3 racer, right? So if he's racing with, Cat 4 people, Cat 5 people, or, maybe he's racing with Cat 2 people, at least he has a very good 1 hour power. So maybe you don't hang around for the bunch sprint, you get out in a breakaway, you got a good 1 hour power of 4 watts per kilo. That probably means you can hold maybe 4.25, 4.5 for a half hour, and you're in a breakaway and the breakaway stays away, right? Just an example of how to use watts per kilogram to your benefit. So now, when you go out to ride, maybe lap some of these efforts so that they are segmented and they are, oh yes, that was that hill climb, that was that sprint, that was that effort that I did over that hill. And then you have a watts per, you can do the watts per kilogram calculation. You could see it live while you're riding, but I'm just saying after the ride, if you don't want to be dealing with it during the ride, after the ride, you have that segmented. And when you upload your data to a power meter analysis software, then you can start grouping these things out. Additionally, if you're using Training Peaks, all that is already populating different graphs and different charts and different stuff. So it will be available to you without having to do the calculations. It's in there, but you got to pay for the subscription. So I'm trying to save you money and trying to teach you how to do it without having that training analysis software. So then you have that data and you say, oh, wow, I have pretty good 5-minute power. And so let's say you do group rides. It's some of the Tuesday, Thursday morning group ride here. Most of the hills are 3 to 6 minutes, I believe. So if you've got a good 5-minute power, you're going to do well on that group ride. It's repetitive. There's a hill and then you go down and another hill and another hill and another hill. So it's quite repetitive. So you got to be able to repeat that 5-minute power, but you could focus on training your 5-minute power on your home trainer. You say, okay, when I was riding with this group, even though I was holding 4.5 watts per kilo, I was getting dropped. Okay, let me do intervals at 4.75 watts per kilo. 5-minute intervals or whatever the time bracket that you want it to be. And that's how you can improve your watts per kilogram in each one of these categories if you choose to. Remember again, a power meter doesn't have to be used for training, doesn't have to be used for, well, what's the most power I could ever hold? No, a power meter can be used. If you watch the latest podcast that I'm still trying to finish the editing, this gentleman always would cramp every time he goes riding with his riding mates. The primary reason is he doesn't ride much. He rides like 1,500 miles for the entire year. So he's going out and he's doing, a 65-mile ride and there's some hills in it and he just hasn't been riding enough. So what happens? He's cramping because his effort level is too high for his fitness. But he got a power meter. And this year when he did the event, he didn't cramp at all. Why? Because he used the power meter to pull back the reins on his efforts so he wouldn't overexert and bring on a cramp. right? So if you can now use the power meter to go easier, that's another benefit of a power meter. So it isn't just how much power can I put out? Sometimes it's how little power can I put out to accomplish the same task. And I've said this before, when I do my ultras, I try to use the least amount of power to accomplish the task of riding 200 miles, 400 miles, 750 miles if it's a 1200 kilometer event. I use the least amount of wattage so that I feel better doing that event and I'm not totally destroyed. And if that means, getting a couple of guys and gals together to, hey, let's rotate, let's do some pace lines instead of just riding alone into the wind by yourself, or just sitting in front of the 10 people behind you, because I see this with ultra cyclists all the time. I'm like, dude, rotate off. All of us could be riding way faster if you just pull off the front, just do your 1 minute turn and roll off. And the rest, and now the 10 of us are rotating through and we're going 2 to 3 miles per hour faster than just you sitting up front. All right, I hope that makes sense. This is one of the longer videos of the series, but I think it's important that I give you examples and then I share with you how to use watts per kilogram to your advantage and how to use it now in your vernacular when talking to other cyclists that have a power meter. And last thing before we go, this will also help you understand when they talk about Tadej holding 6.5 watts per kilo on whatever climb for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever he held, then you do that calculation. Oh, 6 watts per kilo, I weigh 70 kilograms. Wow, I would have to hold 420 watts for 20 minutes to sit on his wheel at 6 watts per kilo. So once you start using watts per kilogram, then all this other stuff, especially what the sports announcers are talking about, the commentators, it starts to make a lot more sense to you how exceptional they are and how ordinary I am, right? Because I'm just ordinary. I do extraordinary things, but I'm just an ordinary guy. And yeah, so anyway, I hope that this was valuable to you. Please like and subscribe. Please hit that like button if you found some value in this video. Please share this video with other folks that do not understand what watts per kilogram mean, and take them along on this knowledge journey with you. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you up the road.